Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's lesson, we're looking at the Part 1 topic books. First, you'll hear a mock interview featuring Finn, followed by a second interview featuring Blondie. Then we'll look at some useful vocabulary and expressions from the interviews that you can use in your own answers. Let's get started with Finn's interview.
Do you enjoy reading books?
I'd say I enjoy reading in moderation. I wouldn't call myself a bookworm, and it's not usually my go-to activity when I have free time. However, if a book has an interesting story or covers a topic I'm curious about, I can get quite into it.
How often do you read books?
Not very often, to be honest. During the semester, most of my reading is related to my coursework. Outside of that, I might read a book every now and then, especially during holidays when I have more free time.
What kinds of books do you like to read?
When I do read, I usually go for science fiction or mystery novels because they're entertaining and easy to get absorbed in. I occasionally read nonfiction as well, but only if it's about a topic that genuinely interests me.
Did you read many books when you were a child?
Yeah, I probably read more as a child than I do now. I used to enjoy adventure stories and fantasy books, and I spent quite a bit of time reading after school. These days, there are just a lot more distractions competing for my attention.
What is the last book you read?
The last book I read was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. A friend recommended it to me, and I ended up enjoying it more than I expected. The story was really engaging, and it didn't feel like a chore to get through.
Do you prefer physical books or ebooks? Why?
I'd probably choose physical books. I don't read often enough to invest in an e-reader, and I find physical books a bit more enjoyable. That said, if I were traveling, I'd definitely appreciate the convenience of having several books on one device.
Is reading a popular activity in your country?
I think it's still fairly popular, but maybe not as popular as it used to be. A lot of people spend their free time on social media, streaming platforms, or video games instead. Even so, there are still plenty of people who enjoy reading regularly.
Have your reading habits changed over the years?
Definitely. When I was younger, I read mainly for fun and probably did it more often. Nowadays, most of my reading is academic because of university, so I don't always feel like picking up a book when I finally have some free time.
Do you usually buy books or borrow them from a library?
Neither, really. Since I don't read books very frequently, I only get one when there's a particular title I want to read. If it's related to my studies, I'll usually borrow it from the university library rather than buy it.
What book would you take on a long journey? Why?
I'd probably take a mystery or science fiction novel, something that's easy to get into and keeps me interested. Long journeys can get pretty boring, so I'd want a book that's entertaining enough to help pass the time. I don't read very often, but traveling is one of the few situations where I can actually sit down and focus on a book without getting distracted.
That brings us to the end of Finn's interview. Next, let's take a look at Blondie's answers to the same set of questions. Do you enjoy reading books?
I do, yeah, though I don't get as much time for it as I'd like these days. Between work and trying to maintain a social life, it's tough. But I still love diving into a good story when I actually get a moment to myself.
How often do you read books?
To be completely honest, it's pretty sporadic. I might go weeks without touching a book because my schedule is just too hectic. But then I'll totally binge read an entire novel over a single weekend when I finally have some downtime.
What kinds of books do you like to read?
Lately, I've been leaning toward memoirs and career-focused non-fiction, mostly because I like reading about other people's real-world experiences. But if I just want to switch my brain off after a long week, I'll pick up a fast-paced thriller.
Did you read many books when you were a child?
Oh, absolutely. I was much more of a bookworm back then, mostly because I didn't have a smartphone or a demanding job taking up all my energy. I used to stay up way past my bedtime reading fantasy novels under the covers.
What is the last book you read?
I actually just finished Atomic Habits a couple of weeks ago. A colleague at work recommended it to me because I was complaining about my terrible time management, and I have to say it actually had some really practical advice.
Do you prefer physical books or ebooks? Why?
I used to be a die-hard fan of physical books, but these days I actually prefer ebooks. Since I'm always on the move, it's just way more convenient to have a whole library on my phone or tablet rather than lugging a heavy paperback around in my bag.
Is reading a popular activity in your country?
I think it depends on who you ask. Among professionals my age, audiobooks and podcasts seem to be taking over because people like to multitask. But traditional reading, I feel like it's sadly taking a back seat to streaming shows and scrolling through social media.
Have your reading habits changed over the years?
Definitely, I don't read nearly as much as I used to, and my taste has changed quite a bit too. When I was younger, I loved getting lost in fantasy novels and huge book series. These days, though, I'm more likely to pick up a memoir or a non-fiction book, especially if it's related to personal development or something I'm interested in professionally.
Do you usually buy books or borrow them from a library?
I mostly buy them online, usually the digital versions. I haven't set foot in a library since my university days, to be honest. It's just easier to click download and have it instantly when I'm in the mood to read.
What book would you take on a long journey? Why?
I'd probably take a really gripping fiction novel, something I can completely lose myself in. Long flights or train rides are the only times I can actually read uninterrupted without checking my work emails. So I'd want an absolute page-turner to make the time fly.
That was Blondie's interview. Finn and Blondie have quite different reading habits and lifestyles, yet both give detailed and natural answers to the same questions. Now let's move on to the vocabulary section and look at some useful expressions you can use when talking about books and reading habits in IELTS speaking. A bookworm is a person who loves reading and spends a lot of time reading books. This is a very common and natural word in everyday English. For example, I was a bit of a bookworm when I was younger. My sister is a real bookworm. She always has a novel with her. You can also use it negatively. I enjoy reading, but I wouldn't call myself a bookworm. This expression is useful because it allows you to describe your relationship with reading in a natural and personal way. To maintain a social life means to continue spending time with friends, family, and other people despite having work, studies, or other responsibilities. For example, university keeps me busy, but I still try to maintain a social life. It can be difficult to maintain a social life when you're working long hours. This phrase is especially useful for topics related to work, study, free time, and lifestyle. If you get absorbed in something, you become completely interested in it and lose track of time. For example, I got absorbed in the story and ended up reading for 3 hours. It's easy to get absorbed in a good TV series. You can use this expression for books, films, games, hobbies, or any activity that captures your attention. The verb binge read means to read a large amount in a short period of time. It's similar to the expression binge watch. For example, I binge read the entire novel over the weekend. When I find a book I really like, I tend to binge read. This is a modern and natural expression that can make your speaking sound more fluent and authentic. To switch your brain off means to relax and stop thinking about work, studies, or other responsibilities. For example, after a stressful day, I like to switch my brain off by watching a movie. Reading fiction helps me switch my brain off. This is a useful expression for describing relaxation and leisure activities. A die-hard fan is someone who is extremely enthusiastic and loyal to a particular hobby, activity, team, book series, or form of entertainment. For example, I'm a die-hard fan of science fiction films. My brother is a die-hard football fan. This expression works well in many IELTS topics, including sports, music, films, books, and hobbies. If you're on the move, you're moving around frequently and living a busy lifestyle. For example, I'm always on the move during the week because of work. Being on the move all the time makes it difficult to relax. This phrase is particularly useful when explaining why you prefer convenient options such as ebooks, audiobooks, or mobile apps. If something takes a back seat, it becomes less important than other things in your life. For example, reading has taken a back seat since I started university. My hobbies took a back seat while I was preparing for my exams. This is an excellent expression for discussing how your priorities or habits have changed over time. Downtime refers to periods when you're not working, studying, or dealing with responsibilities. In other words, it's your free time. For example, I like spending my downtime watching documentaries. I don't get much downtime during the semester. This is a useful word because it sounds natural and can be used in many IELTS topics related to work-life balance and leisure. A page turner is a book that is so exciting that you want to keep reading. For example, it was such a page turner that I finished it in 2 days. I love mystery novels that are real page turners. This is an excellent piece of vocabulary for describing books and reading experiences in IELTS speaking. A gripping novel is a book that is extremely interesting and holds your attention from beginning to end. The adjective gripping means exciting, engaging, and difficult to stop reading. For example, I recently read a gripping novel that kept me up late at night. I prefer gripping novels because they keep me interested all the way through. You can also use the adjective with other forms of entertainment. It was a gripping film. The documentary was absolutely gripping. This is a great alternative to basic adjectives like interesting or good and can help you sound more precise when describing books, films, or stories in IELTS speaking. And that's all for today's lesson. I hope you've picked up some useful vocabulary and ideas for talking about books and reading habits in IELTS speaking. If you'd like more practice like this, you can become a member for extra lessons. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next one.